Hey everyone. So in the aftermath of the Iowa caucuses, let's just call this political potpourri. Just a bunch of random thoughts and observations that I have about the Iowa caucuses and what they mean today, a day later. Number one, obviously Bernie had a great night last night. It was a virtual tie. At the time I went to bed, the outcome was still in doubt. He gave a very powerful speech and had the interesting opportunity to give the final speech of the evening, usually reserved for the winner, even though we know today he didn't quite win. But it was a virtual tie, as he said. Now, that's why I think it's rather unfortunate that he's talking today about a recount, questioning the validity of the vote count and talking about irregularities. I don't know whether there were irregularities or not, but from a PR and political standpoint, I don't think there's much value in arguing about that today. I mean, it was an incredibly powerful statement that he made, with essentially 50% of the vote. He should take that, move on, and not get bogged down in a lot of sort of legalisms about this vote or that vote in Iowa. Ultimately, the Iowa caucus process is a mess, and hopefully it won't have the priority in future election cycles that it does this year. Number two. Donald Trump obviously had a very bad evening. And the question to be asked today is, why did he have such a bad evening? The conventional wisdom is that Ted Cruz's get-out-the-vote machine and the sophisticated software that went along with it were simply so good, it allowed him to target and bring out his voters in a way that had never been done before. So it was simply a matter of the efficiency of his ground game that allowed him to surpass Donald Trump. Well, that may have been true. I mean, that was certainly part of it by all accounts. But I think it's also reasonable to consider that in the seriousness and the gravity of a voting situation, voters stopped and thought, is Donald Trump really the person that we think is the best likely nominee for the Republican Party? It may be that people recognized sort of a lack of seriousness about the candidate that they really hadn't thought about before when simply asked by poll takers over the telephone. Along those same lines, observation number three, I think Donald's relatively poor showing last night represented the revenge of Megyn Kelly. I think it probably hurt him to skip the debate for a number of reasons. First of all, his rationale for skipping the debate really didn't hold water. The so-called feud that he was having with Megyn Kelly was always a one-sided feud. She was not feuding with him. He was simply fabricating a lot of tension with her. Second of all, when the debate actually had a more thoughtful and high-toned quality than the ones with Donald Trump, that didn't make him look very good sitting on the sideline. And the most important reason I think he was hurt by skipping the debate was that when people looked at the quality with which Megyn Kelly moderated the debate, it made him look even more foolish. I mean, after all, this is a guy who's been calling her a bimbo for about a month now. So I think what happened in the Iowa caucus is that it kind of reaffirmed the idea of the later we get in the calendar, the more serious the voting situation is, the more Donald Trump's lack of any real agenda. We're going to build a wall and make the Mexicans pay for it. We're basically going to rip off the oil in the Middle East. We're going to deport 11 million people. Well, that obviously really isn't an agenda at all, and I think it's going to come back to haunt him. Number four, so Marco Rubio had a good evening, came in third place, almost eclipsed Donald Trump. My observation about Marco Rubio is, am I the only person that thought that his, I guess you'd have to call it a victory speech, was way too long and way too bombastic? This morning on Morning Joe, I heard his speech just juxtaposed with Barack Obama's speech after winning Iowa in 2008. And the speeches were eerily similar. I'm not accusing him of plagiarism, but there was a great similarity between the two. The big difference, though, was that Barack Obama won Iowa. Marco Rubio came in third. This was the most glorious third-place finishing speech I've ever heard, and I kept waiting for him to get off the stage so the rest of the evening could get going. It never happened. His speech seemed to go on forever. Number 5, has everybody heard about Ben Carson's reason for leaving the campaign today? He told one of the embedded reporters that he needed a new change of clothes. And that was why he was going down to Florida, wasn't going to New Hampshire, wasn't going to South Carolina. He needed a new change of clothes. When Anderson Cooper of CNN got that report last night, I thought he had a good line. He said, heck, I've been in the same suit for 4 days now. What's he complaining about? When I first heard it, I thought that maybe he was using change of clothes as a metaphor. You know, kind of like I've got to powder my nose, I've got to catch my breath. But apparently he meant it literally. Ben Carson is leaving the campaign because he needs to get some new clothes. Just another bizarre note added to the list associated with Ben Carson. Number 6, in the wake of Bernie Sanders' good showing last night, I think 2 things flow from that. First of all, every time he has a good electoral outcome, it chips away a little bit at the conventional wisdom that he can't win with the designation Democratic Socialist next to his name. The more success he has, frankly, the more mainstream he looks, and the more viable he looks. And I think that's going to be a pattern that continues over the weeks, assuming that he continues to have good outcomes. The second important thing I think that flows from his tie showing last night was that it puts more pressure on Liz Warren to make a commitment one way or the other. She said in the last couple of days that we will see whether she will make an endorsement. Watching Morning Joe this morning, I listened to Mika Brzezinski offering the wishful thought that Liz Warren would come out and endorse Hillary. Now, that would certainly be a bonanza for Hillary if she did. The problem is, it ain't never going to happen. It's either Bernie or nothing. Liz Warren is the only woman in the Senate right now who has not endorsed Hillary. So if she hadn't endorsed Hillary up till now, she's certainly not going to do it with Bernie surging at this point. My thought is that the pressure is going to become irresistible at some point for her to endorse Bernie Sanders. Number 7, and my final thought from the Iowa caucuses, and my what I would call my biggest outrage from the Iowa caucuses, and maybe folks have already heard about this, maybe they haven't. It's the flyer that Ted Cruz sent to potential voters in Iowa, where he essentially said on the flyer that they, or implied on the flyer, that they had violated the law by not having voted frequently enough in the past, that the Iowa Secretary of State was keeping tabs on them, and in order to improve their standing, they had to come out and vote. Let me read you what the flyer said. Election alert, voter violation, public record, further action needed. You are receiving this election notice because of low expected voter turnout in your area. Your individual voting history, as well as your neighbors, are public record. Their scores are published below, and many of them will see your score as well. Caucus on Monday to improve your score, and please encourage your neighbors to caucus as well. A follow-up notice may be issued following Monday's caucuses. I mean, this was such a falsification that it caused the Iowa Secretary of State to come out and issue a denunciation. There is no such thing as an election violation related to the frequency of voting. said Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate. You know, the folks that created the phony Planned Parenthood view were just indicted for the falsification of government records. Not only is this corrupt, not only is this unethical, but it comes pretty close in my mind to a fraud visited upon the people who received the notice. It's pretty remarkable. And if there's any karma, if there's any political karma, it will come back to hurt Ted Cruz in the future. So the caucuses lived up to their billing. It was a spine tingler last night. It had me at the edge of my chair up until midnight, 1 in the morning. And let's see what happens in New Hampshire. I'm Jeff Rowan. Thanks for watching.